Hi everyone, this is Elias Martin from CollectingJapanesePrints.com. Welcome to Woodblock Wednesday, where every Wednesday we get together and talk about Japanese prints, paintings, and history. So I'd like to start off by just checking in with everyone. How's everyone doing out there in quarantine? I live in Chicago, so we're approaching almost a month. I think at this point in time, things are starting to look better for most part of the United States. At least we could say that we could see the light at the end of the tunnel. So the numbers that they were predicting of infected and people who are going to pass have not been reached, thank God. And so I think we're all doing the right thing. Continue doing what you've been doing, staying home if you don't need to go out, and social distancing. I think that's been key. And as I've mentioned, this is a great opportunity to learn more about Japanese art, Japanese prints in particular. And, I've been using this time, I think, wisely. I've been sort of studying my own personal collection. I've been reading up on artists and examining certain prints. And I think today I wanted to discuss something with all of you that doesn't get a lot of attention, I think, in the woodblock print community. A lot of collectors are either interested in, classical to late Edo period prints or 20th century prints. And all of those things are great. I love them. But I think, I happen to have some really great examples of what many call primitives, Japanese prints that are primitive. But there's this term. What that means is that these are Japanese prints that were produced basically at the dawn of printmaking in Japan. When that sort of technology came in from China, they were making Buddhist woodblock prints that were black and white. And so the Japanese started making prints in the same way. And the very earliest prints that we know of are one color or a single impression off one block that are black and white. And some of them, many of them, that survive were hand colored. They have also really wonderful embellishments. And so I have two wonderful examples of that, and so I'd like to share that with you today. So without further ado, let's go to the table and have a look. So today I brought two prints to show you by the same artist. His name is Okumura Masanobu. And Masanobu was born in 1686. He died in 1764. And the print that I'm showing you is a very large pillar-style print from 1749, not 1749. So it's incredible to be able to see something this old and in this great condition. The print title is Sanogawa Ichimatsu with Puppet. So they've been able to identify the individual, and he's a puppeteer, and he has a puppet here. And so there's so much to talk about. But first and foremost, as I said, this print is considered a primitive in a sense that it was printed with one block of wood. It was a black and white block. So you could kind of compare it to a hanshita, or the key block in some ways, except this was it. This was the entire printing, and the unlike hanshitas, it was printed with a very dark black sumi style pigment. And at that time in Japan, the technology had not, no one really came up with the technology of printing colored prints yet. And so in this particular print, you could see that though one would call this primitive in the sense that there was only one block used, you could see that the woodblock carving on the black outline was still amazing. It was done by an expert woodblock carver. You could see these lines these fluid lines that look calligraphic. That, I mean, the fact that they were able to do this even at this early period of time showed you the skill that the woodblock carvers had at this period of time. And what's interesting, I mean, there's so many things that I could talk about, but at first blush, I want to talk about the style. And you could see the face is a full-figured face of the individual, and that style of full-figured face is actually something that was inherited from China. It's sort of the high court style of depicting figures. And so, you know, for some of you who've seen Tang Dynasty tomb pottery with the full-figured women, there's a nickname for them called fat ladies. Well, that is kind of the style. This full-figured face, that is not necessarily Japanese yet. You know, you'll later see artists that take that style and sort of reduce it and simplify it, streamline it, and make it their own, and of course inherently Japanese. But in this case, what you see here that is Japanese is this kimono. This kimono is beautiful. It is decorated with different moans and different motifs. You have grass, or actually we have a dandelion here. We have a moan here, which is, a moan is a family crest. And then we have here a motif of it looks like the immortal poets. And then I would imagine these are the poems associated with each poet. And what's interesting to note is that all the color that is on this print was applied by hand. And the interesting thing is that this color is extremely fugitive, which means that it's very sensitive to light and it will disappear over a period of time with the exposure to light. And there are other examples that are known, and I'll show you some. One is at the Honolulu Academy of Arts, and another one is, I think, at the Tokyo National Museum. And you'll be able to see different states of condition, but also different colorations, because it was all done by hand. The other thing that I think is really interesting on this impression, which is not on my website yet, but this is something that is available for sale, as is the other one. It'll eventually get there, but I wanted to point out that the embellishments here, this calligraphic embellishment here and down here, is actually added by hand. It is not present on the other impressions. So, you know, I want to zoom in so you could see the print. What's interesting also about this print is that it's an oversized print, meaning that at this point in time, they hadn't yet standardized what we consider oban size, double oban, and so on. And so this sheet is a pillar style print, but it's in a regular format. So it's almost 3 oban prints together. If I could kind of bring this over here. This is slightly larger than an oban size sheet here. This is about a third larger, and so you could see how big this print is actually. You know, I'm trying to find something that I could compare it to. Here's a regular size pen. You could see how large the print is. And a few other things I can talk about this. For pillar style prints in Japan, they were produced originally to be sort of added as scrolls or as kakemonos. This print was printed and actually pasted onto a kakemono. I know this because you see these lines going across. Those are the lines or the wrinkles that have been embedded into the paper from years of rolling, unrolling, rolling, unrolling. And so that's what happens to the paper. The paper is very strong, so there are no weak spots, but those lines do indicate, at the very least, that it was mounted as a kakemono and also stored as a kakemono. And the lines are created from rolling it particularly tightly. And what's interesting also is that these kakemono prints were kind of created for a particular sort of pillar in a traditional Japanese Edo period house. And this pillar happened to actually be right around the area where they would cook, or the kitchen. And what's interesting is that a lot of these prints do not survive in this condition because of the environment that they were housed in. An area of cooking where they're cooking with open charcoal and other things, and you could imagine the smoke from the charcoal, the smoke from meat and other things being cooked. You could just imagine the years of soot and other things that could accumulate on the surface of the paper. This print, though it was mounted as a kakemono at some point, was not actually displayed in that area. So you could see that the paper is relatively clean. It's not toned or darkened to an extent that it affects with the design. So that's interesting. And so this is why, when you look at kakemono style prints, why a lot of them have a lot of toning or a lot of darkening to the paper. It's not necessarily just toning, it's basically the soot and the soiling from years of exposure to that area of the house. So that gives you a certain sense of what happens to prints when they're improperly displayed or stored. The other thing I want to point out about this print, and I want to show you the verso, you could tell that there's some soiling and darkening. It's actually more dark than anything. But the format of this print is interesting. There's a seam here and a seam here. So the paper itself was pasted together. They hadn't yet had the standard format of making prints, and so this is sort of in some ways like a jigsaw puzzle of different sized paper to create this entire print. I find that fascinating. It's very hard to show you here in this light, but without like really holding up the paper in a weird angle, which I cannot do with one hand. But as I said, it is stitched, which is kind of interesting for these really early primitives. And so now what I'm going to try to do on my iPad, I'm going to try to bring in, all right, so this is a impression that is at the Honolulu Academy. No, I'm sorry. This one is at the Tokyo National Museum, and you could see, if I could angle this a certain way, you could see that the coloration is slightly different, and then there's areas of embellishment that are completely different, but generally it compares very favorable. In fact, I kind of liked my impression a little bit more. There's no calligraphic additions at the bottom, and I also think the impression that I have has a little bit of an earthier quality. The colors are a little darker, a little bit richer. So I kind of like that. But this is a beautiful impression, and let me show. Oops. Let me try to go to the Honolulu Academy of Arts. This is another one, and this is from the famed Michener collection. And Michener was a wonderful collector who donated many of his ukiyo-e and 20th century prints to the Honolulu Academy of Arts, instantly making them one of the most important repositories for Japanese prints. And in this print, it's a little out of focus because I had to blow up the image, but you could see there's a significant fading to the colors. And you could also see the area where the paper's stitched, right there and right there. Again, these 3 sheets that were put together to create this one format. And, you know, again, to show my print once more so you could get a sense of how the state of condition this print is in. The colors here are really phenomenal, actually. And when you compare it to the Michener collection, this is lighter, and it's lighter because it wasn't applied lighter. This was faded over time. And once again, the Tokyo National Museum copy. So I will do a close-up so you could see the wonderful hand embellishments and hand coloring on the kimono. And again, the detail, the calligraphic detail in the kimono is just really wonderful, and it's so early in terms of the era of Japanese printmaking. But even then, they were able to carve something this exquisite. Look at the calligraphic, the calligraphy here. I mean, it looks like it's hand done, but it's all printed. The other thing I want to point out about this design, which I think is very charming, there's this wonderful element of movement. It's very fluid. So we have the figure's foot sort of on. You can see the bottom of the foot as the figure is walking with the puppet, and so there's this really wonderful fluid quality to it that the kimono echoes the movement of the figure, and it's interesting because the doll, the bunraku puppet, is a bit lifeless right now, but the artist Masanobu animates this figure almost like a puppet itself. The artist producing this figure in a really animated way, echoing the job that the puppeteer must do with the puppet. I think that's really clever. Yeah, it's very clever and really, really beautiful and powerful when you see this in a printed form. Now, for those of you who are interested in learning more about primitives or early Japanese prints, this book is a really good place to start. The Dawn of the Floating World. It's a book that was produced by the MFA in Boston, and there's wonderful examples of prints by Masanobu and other artists, some of which are paintings. But most of the prints in there, in fact, all of them that have color are hand embellished. So, I just wanted to point out that really great reference book that I've referred to many, many times when doing research on these early period prints. Now, the other print I want to show you is also by Masanobu. It's a smaller format print, almost the size of a Obon size print. It's kind of like, it's larger than an Ibon. It's kind of, again, it's a weird, irregular format that hadn't yet been sort of, there was no real convention to the sizing of these prints. And in this print, again, it's primitive in the sense that it was printed with one block of a wood block. It was the key block, or just the black outline was applied. And, again, both of these are in some ways like, you can imagine them as a page out of a coloring book. And the artisans, after the printer finished printing, would hand apply pigment with a brush, coloring in between the lines. And on this one, I picked this one intentionally because it's, first of all, it's beautiful. Second of all, the colors are so strong on this print. You could see how wonderfully they were added to the design. You could see the oranges and the yellows. And on this impression, we get gold. This is gold leaf. That is extraordinarily rare to find on these early period prints. So there's gold leaf here, and then in addition to that, this black area here, that's kind of a, people call that lacquer, though it's not lacquer, but it is a pigment that's applied that dries with a sheen to it that looks like it could be lacquer. And so, in this impression of this particular print, we see again the full figure face of a figure with this wonderful Japanese style kimono. And it's just gorgeous to be able to see something in this state of preservation. And so I'll go in and zoom in so you can enjoy the print. These two make quite the pair. And I'll see if I could flip this over so you could see the verso. There we have a little bit of tape on the back. And here what's interesting is there are two collector seals. And with these really early rare Ukiyo-e from this early period, you often see collector seals because the fact that they're in this state of preservation, it really means that when they left Japan, and probably at an early period of time when all these prints were leaving Japan, and there was these really well-established collections being put together, actually. So at that time, Van Gogh, Monet, Manet, they were all interested in Japanese prints, and they were collecting them. And a lot of these European collections that are mostly now housed in museums were built, and a lot of them have these seals. It's kind of fun to be able to look at them and see if you could identify them. There's quite a few that have yet to be identified, and I have to do a little bit of research on those seals to identify who these collectors could have been. I don't know if you'll be able to see how large that print is, just laying there on my table. I have an extra large iPad. You could see how much larger that print is compared to the iPad. Well, thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed looking at two very rare early Masanobu prints. I wanted to say a few things about the last video. I got a lot of great feedback from all of you, a lot of collectors interested in learning more about just tips on collecting, and so I plan on doing a few videos in the near future that highlight possibly condition problems, what to avoid, what you could deal with a professional conservator. It's always good to know when you're buying a print, what can be actually restored, conserved in a responsible way, and what are things that you should just leave alone and not buy. So that video will hopefully come soon. I just need to find some examples of prints that you shouldn't buy, and since I don't have them right now, I'll need to source those, but I plan on doing that fairly soon. And of course, every Wednesday I'll present to you some more prints to discuss. So there's a lot of things to look forward to. And I'm also working on my latest exhibition. I was going to put it up about a month ago, but I decided to close up the gallery and wait until, oops, I keep moving this phone, until things got a bit better. And so hopefully, fingers crossed, that exhibition will go up in about a month or so. But there's still a lot of things up on my website. I have a bookstore. I have with videos of the books. I also have a lot of prints online with a lot of information. So I encourage all of you to just check me out. Check out the website, collectingjapaneseprints.com. and I look forward to seeing you next week. So thanks for joining me. Till then.